And we are live with our 98th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? The world's burning down, so we have that, right? But thanks for coming. Thanks for listening to us today. Ken and I have a few topics to go on about today. I think the biggest thing is mark your calendars for June 24th. We'll have a form up this week to register, I guess, for Midsummer Nights Con. All the registration, I think, is going to require at this point is a valid email address, so we can send you the link to join a bunch of talks from a bunch of interesting people. That's going to be, again, June 24th, Midsummer Nights Con, and it will be on absoluteappsec.com within the next couple of days that we have the link up and the information about who's talking, what they're speaking about. We've got a really exciting lineup of, I think, 8 or 9 people, right, Ken?
Yeah.
Each talk's going to be very succinct, 20 to 30 minutes at most, and delve into some interesting topic from application security or security in general. So we're excited to do that with Logical, and we'll just see how it goes, right?
Yeah, it's going to start at 3:30 in the afternoon on June 24th. So
Okay.
It will go until I think 9 or 9:30. All these numbers are all Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, just it will actually be part like at night.
Yeah, because it is a Midsummer Nights Con, right? That was the whole idea. So, other than that, Ken and I were just talking bug bounties a little bit because we're involved in bug bounty programs. I think, Ken, do you just want to jump straight into that, or is there something else that you want to talk about today?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to obviously, yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, at some point, I think we're gonna this one's gonna be all over the place just because we're gonna address like recent events as well and stuff like that. So we can dive into the bug bounty aspect stuff right now if you'd like. Which, by the way, just so you know, we're keeping a rolling tally at GitHub, and we have seen an influx in submissions. But not necessarily resulting in payouts.
Really?
We have paid out. I just mean, like, statistically, it's not, everyone on that like triple amount of the submissions that we're getting. So
yeah, because I know we had that discussion last week about number of submissions versus like just over the quarantine period as more people are free, quote unquote, right, to work on bug bounties, and whether or not that was resulting in more submissions. I know the couple of programs that I'm in that I'm helping manage are private bounties or private programs. So like, one of them was doing a promotion in the month of May. So we saw an uptick there, but it wasn't necessarily because of, it wasn't because of quarantine or social distancing. It was probably more a direct result of inviting more researchers and paying out bonuses, right? So anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting to hear that you're seeing more, but the quality isn't necessarily improved, I guess, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, the quality researchers are always submitting the same quality stuff, but we got a handful of, more than a handful, probably a statistically large number in comparison to how many people have submitted who like that. It seems they might be pretty new to this. And I think, I mean, we kind of been talking about it every week, just kind of like updating where the trend is going, and it's pretty much the same right now. So people are still staying home, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I'm sure it does. I mean, we've seen an influx during the whole virus, so which I'm not sure. Are we still doing COVID now? I forget. It's like which thing is happening? You still there, Seth? Are you frozen or am I frozen? I think Seth dropped off again. It's going to be some dead air, I guess, while I wait for him. I'm sure he'll hit me up here in an instant messenger in a second. I know he was going to talk about some bug bounty stuff he's been going through, talking to researchers, having to explain what the difference between a risk, a vulnerability, and an exploit is. Hey, Seth, I was just kind of like introing into what we were talking about before the podcast started, which was you saying that you've been helping out with the bug bounty program, and it's been a lot of trying to explain like the difference between being exploited and what an exploit is, and like what a vulnerability is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, a lot of it goes back to kind of nuances of a common one that researchers have been submitting lately has to do with cipher suites that are being used for TLS connections, right? And I mean, it's one thing to know that a cipher suite or a hash in general is exploitable, like theoretically exploitable. Right? Just because someone does a DEF CON talk about how they can crack, MD5 doesn't mean that in the real world that actually happens. Right? And I'm using MD5 as an example because years ago Kaminsky, Dan gave all these talks about how MD5 was weak and how it could be attacked and there could be collisions with it. But it took a good decade plus for us to actually see any of that in the wild. So while like the industry at large was migrating away from MD5 because of those weaknesses, it didn't mean that it still didn't have uses and it still couldn't be used within a security context. And so the difficulty that I have is that, okay, there's some of these attacks that have come out over the last 5 to 10 years against different cipher suites, different protocols, and people go to DEF CON and they show that, hey, if I can gather 200 gigs of data, then I can potentially see some of that data as it transfers back and forth, right? I'm like, that's great, right? But the conditions that exist around that make it very difficult to say, like if you come to me as someone running a bug bounty and tell me that that's a medium or high risk issue because someone has to collect 100 gig of data from an application that at most generates 1 to 2 meg of data in any given session, you're losing credibility as a researcher to me, right? Because you haven't necessarily done the research on what the real risks of a vulnerability are and what it takes to exploit that, right? It's a lot easier. Granted, it's a lot easier to go show something like server-side request forgery or cross-site scripting or SQL injection because the proof of concept that you build or in discovering that vulnerability is actually an exploit. But a proof of concept showing that a specific cipher suite is being used or a specific hash is being used within like a TLS negotiation is not the same thing as an exploit, right? To actually exploit that, you have to gather, however many gigs of data or however many sessions between the user and the backend in order to reveal what the key is and get that information back out. So I have a really I'm just getting a little jaded, right, from the bug bounty management perspective. And I think anybody that runs bug bounty, they all complain about the, kind of the back and forth with the researchers at times because it doesn't seem to help, right? Like I've actually put into responses to researchers give me more information about how this is actually being exploited. And your information can't be there was a DEF CON talk on this a couple of years ago, right? That's not a valid exploit of my instance that's running in Azure of using this specific cipher, right? And I don't know, I know you guys run into that, and I know you triage a lot of it, a lot of bug bounty stuff. So it's just that whole kind of nuance of what is an exploit, what is a proof of concept, if you're not willing to do the research and you're just looking for tool output and to spit it out my direction, I don't really want to see it, right? And I don't know, like, yeah, what's your experience there, Ken? I know you guys see a lot more reports than I do.
Yeah.
I know you've got like canned responses to things, and you've probably got more triggers and stuff built up than some of the small programs that I'm helping with. But how do you deal with, in general, researchers that, I don't know, are obstinate, I guess?
That's a good question. I mean, like, I do try, I think so on our team, try not to like just say what I do, because it's like what our whole team does. So our whole team, we try to be, I mean, we do, like we said, we do have responses that are pretty in depth for known things, and we can use those in our responses. Sometimes though, like there's not a canned response, right? There's not like a nice lengthy discussion or explanation. So sometimes we have to, manually write those up. And so we try to do our best to, like, if it's not obvious spam, try to give the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes you'll have a thread that goes on and the researcher keeps arguing. And usually, if that's not usually, whenever that's the case, it's always somebody who is like, they're not the best technically and not super experienced. And it's usually just people that are unreasonable, that become a problem. And at that point, it's kind of like you have a few choices. You can lock the thread. You can not lock the thread, let them shout into the void. You can, oftentimes they'll kind of shout into the void in the sense that they'll keep commenting on something that you've already like explained multiple times why it's not vulnerable. And then they'll eventually ask for mediation between your bug bounty platform and the company and the researcher. And very often the HackerOne can see the internal dialogue and the discussions going, because you have internal, I'm saying HackerOne, sorry, your bug bounty submission or your bug bounty platform can see communication going on, because there's internal dialogue and there's external dialogue being what everybody sees, internal being what we talk about internally amongst ourselves. So they can kind of see all of that info and get an idea of why we decided to do what we did. And to my knowledge, I don't believe we've ever had any issues, because you've got a team of people that have been doing this for, I don't want to say doing this for so long, because like that sounds like, oh, they're just automatically know what they're talking about. That's not true, but we're all very experienced in the technologies that we're working in. So, and we're familiar with our product. So,
yeah.
Well, if you've gotten rejected multiple times, it's for a reason.
Yeah. And that's where I have the kind of the biggest hang up is, like, I don't know, like we talk about this in the course all the time, right? How much time you and I spend doing information gathering, application profiling, figuring out how the application does what it does. And this goes for, code review. This goes for any assessments. This goes for bug bounty research. If I dive into, a program itself, like I realize sometimes there's kind of a race to, hey, we found something with a tool. I want to be the first to report it because I want to get paid. I get that. But if I respond with a, hey, that's not how this application works, and am trying to coach you along in this is how it works, go find other stuff instead, because it looks like you've stumbled onto something, take that and run with it instead of arguing with me about, one low or medium risk issue behind the scenes that I'm willing. Honestly, like most of the organizations that I work with are willing to pay out, like GitHub, for interesting research that spurs discussion, especially among the security team, right? as far as, hey, was this a good decision that we made? Is this really a vulnerability, right? Even if it doesn't result in a high risk finding, we'll typically throw some amount at you that that basically says, hey, kudos, there's something here. Why don't you keep tracing it down? But the lack of kind of initiative that I get from the bug bounty, side of things, where they just want to run a simple script, dump the output, and have me pay them, it's borderline ridiculous at times, right? And part of that's that I know that part of that is just the maturity of the bug bounty program that we're dealing with, and the level of it, and it's just a small one, and so we don't necessarily have that same kind of like top tier researcher that's jumping into those programs, because it isn't the same big name as a GitHub or as a Google or something like that. But then I also don't have to wade through all of the other reports that come in, so it's this weird balance. So
yeah, we get a mix too. I don't know if Qualys is giving away like some free license or something, but we've gotten a lot of scans from a lot of scan output from Qualys, especially like the one where Rails sessions are detected, like client side sessions, and so they flag it because they're like, if you have a known key, like say you used, let's say if you were missing an environment variable, you fell back to some like key like test or dev
or a null string or something like that. Yeah.
They've got easy checks built into Qualys, but you need to confirm that it's actually exploitable, and people don't do that second step. So they'll just send it over the wall being like, oh yeah, you definitely are vulnerable. And it's like, go and look at the application, run Metasploit, all that stuff. And it's not vulnerable. So yeah, man, I don't know. I'm having a hard time right now just focusing on anything. I'll be honest with you. I haven't really cared about anything technical for about the last, I don't know, week or so. It's been really hard to focus at work. Even talking about bug bounties, I'm just sitting here like, man, world's in chaos and I don't really care. I mean, I care, but it's just like, we're in a weird time, man, and some fucked up shit's going on. And it's a little hard to just be like, okay, I'm going to go about my 9 to 5. And, realistically, I always tell, like, when I've had this conversation in the past, when things have been a little crazy, I'm always like, just focus on what you can control. But it's a little hard when, like, last night I thought I might wake up and we're in martial law. It's a little bit of a weird time. It's pretty hard to, I mean, I'm curious how people are doing their jobs right now. I know a lot of us are still, I mean, I'm always remote, but there are people that they're still not going to the office. They're working from home still. So, they're alone and they're dealing with like trying to get their jobs done, and then all the craziness going on. And I'm curious how everybody else is sort of, hanging in there. Like, I'm curious, how are you like functioning? I mean, you don't have a choice. You have a business to run with people that depend on you to pay bills. And so I'm curious how you're someone in your situation where you don't have really a choice but to press forward. Like, how's that working for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I do feel like my 9 to 5 hasn't changed too much, right? Outside of it, it is hard to stay focused. I mean, it was already, difficult with everybody else, like the business world in general, all moving remote, right? So there's a lot more kind of these Zoom calls and everything else that's going on. So I'm supporting a lot more kind of like in-person like communications than I normally would. A lot of that would get pushed off to email, and people wouldn't be as inclined to have a Zoom call or something else. And so, that in general, on top of, tracking COVID cases and how's like our county doing, I've got friends that work at the local hospital where they've had cases, stuff like that, that kind of pull you out of it, have made it difficult to stay focused just, during working hours. And actually, like, I think it's been better for me, like personally. I've I've just had to turn off like any work style stuff after hours. And it's actually been easier to turn that off because I'm more concerned about, hey, what else is going on? Watching some of the riots and things going on last night, even here in Salt Lake City, right? They've got a curfew in effect and they're pushing the rioters down the street, and things are escalating, and they're trying not to, just watching that whole craziness happen. The last thing on my mind is, oh crap, I gotta step in and look at this code. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was telling you, man, I was driving, like I wasn't aware of cause you've been to where I live. It's very suburban. Yeah. It's very suburban. It's very like out there. And, it's not like, we're just far away from DC. And so I went to go get dinner for my son and I, and so like long story short, we got pulled off. So first of all, everything was closed and I didn't really understand why. And then there were cops everywhere, and then the road started getting blocked. And next thing I know, there's people in the streets. They blocked the main, like Linton Hall, main road. They blocked that off. They're walking in the middle of it. So like that came out of nowhere. Luckily, it was peaceful. And to be clear, like for those watching the podcast, obviously we stand in solidarity for George Floyd and his family. No question there. Totally in support of protests. Just want to get that out of the way right away. But it was like, so the roads were blocked off, and so I had to find some back roads to get home, and had to had to drive a ways to find a grocery store that was even open, like in a different neighboring town, and then circle back through back roads to get home, make dinner, everything like that. And then, Trump came on, and man, by the end of his speech where he's mentioning, and by the way, I know we don't normally get political on the podcast, but I don't think there's any chance that you can't get a little, this doesn't feel like politics anymore. This feels like this is our lives. Like we got to deal with this. We got to talk about it. It feels different. And, I don't know if everybody feels that. Maybe it's just me, but I think it feels different for a lot of people. And, anyways, I don't know. I'm rambling, but so long story short, then Trump gave his speech. I thought, man, what are the odds we wake up with soldiers in our front yard tomorrow and we're under martial law? So I know that sounds like kind of why would you go that far? But after watching that last night, it was like, whew. And so it's just been a hard time to get things. It's been hard to work. It's been hard to care about technology. It's been hard to read blogs, and it's been hard to just do anything other than focus on the current shit show that we're all dealing with, to be honest, man. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, you think about the different Slack channels that we're in and the people that we know and where they live. And, they're posting that, some of that's going on right outside their apartments, right? And outside their homes. And And then, anything that's on Twitter, like InfoSec Twitter has not been about InfoSec for the last week. There's a little bit of research and some stuff thrown in there and all the promoted tweets from the businesses. But the rest of it is realistically crap. How are people staying safe, right? And how are you, I don't know.
It's a fun time to be a parent.
Yeah. Well, no, and that was it. Last night, watching some of that on the news, and what do you do with your 7-year-old, right? How do you explain what's going on and why people are angry? Because honestly, that sort of behavior is definitely a learned thing, right? Having taken the boys all over the world, they just see someone else, right? It's just another person. We've dealt with all sorts of, races and religions and everything else over the last year, right? And so trying to explain to them, okay, well, some people don't like some other people, and bad things happen, and now everyone's angry, and we're trying to protest, and yet, like, police are supposed to be people that are free or are good to you, and people are, and they are, but there are bad people everywhere. This whole good versus, I don't know, man.
I know, man. I tried explaining it. I basically told. So when I was explaining it, I was basically, I was like, "Hey, man. First of all, I was very realistic with Max, and I told him the truth. I told him the truth of what happened. And because I mean, I didn't get into the graphic details, but I was like, a man was murdered, and I mean, let's be honest, that's what it was. It was nothing else but murder. And I think it's part, and I explained that it's like some people don't like other people for like superficial dumb reasons, and it's silly, and obviously we don't think like that. And but I was just kind of like, hey, people are upset about a lot of things right now. And what I told him, and which I think is actually like really true, is that life has gotten better over, like, I think even if you look objectively between now and 300 years ago, things are better. However, there are still problems. And that's what I explained to him, is like, no matter how good you feel it is, there are probably people that don't feel that way. Like, if your life is really great, that's great, but not everybody feels that way. And like, they're upset for valid reasons, and they want to improve things. And no matter what, it's always good to like improve things. And that's how I kind of tried to frame it, was like, there are things that are happening that are not right. People are upset about it, and they want to improve the situation. And even though things are pretty good and your life is going to continue to be pretty good, people will, that's just you. And not everybody's got that, and people will continually want to just improve things. And I don't know if any of what I just said is coherent, but it sounded great when I was explaining to a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
So, it is a weird time, man. You have to explain these things, and it's fine. Like, it's part of your job as a parent is to explain these things, but to do it in a sensitive way that kind of captures all the nuances is very difficult, for a 7-year-old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the world is complex, right? And the fact that there's no true black and white, and it's all just shades of gray. I don't know, but there was like a distinct difference. I'm thinking back to Saturday, and watching SpaceX and that launch that happened, and feeling like, oh man, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, look at what we can accomplish from an engineering perspective, and explaining, how we have to launch, and, the whole, like, people are amazing, the things that we can accomplish, to crap, like, look at what's going on in the strife. And, both sides are trying to, well, I don't know if you want to say both sides, because you've got situations where, the police are kneeling down and they're protesting along with the protesters. And then you've got others that are militarizing things, and like, just that, like, difference between, hey, people are awesome, to, people don't understand each other and aren't willing to try and understand each other, is such a, I don't know, it's hard to reconcile for me as an adult, like, that, trying to explain that to a young child is difficult, right? And then have them feel okay about sleeping at night, or, not being worried that, again, martial law is going to show up the next morning.
Yeah, I left that part out of the discussion. Yeah. The hard thing too is, like, man, let's be honest, you and I don't know what it's like to be on the side of the coin where we're not minorities. We're not like,
no, I'm not afraid to go for a run at 9:00 at night at dusk, right? And if I do that, the little old lady says hi to me, right? And we wave and smile, right? And I can just understand, hey, guess what? If you walk out and everyone assumes you're a threat, I don't know how that would be to live. right? I don't, right? That the whole kind of white privilege discussion.
I'll tell you. Oh wait, crap! You're paused again. Hold on. I'm gonna wait for you to unpause.
My end paused yet?
Yeah, just a little. Probably Comcast. We can blame Comcast for the issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so sorry, you were saying.
No, I was just saying that
Nobody
like,
thinks you're a threat when you're out at night. Nobody like
no,
looks at you like
no
you're
one does.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Although with coronavirus, I always
Yeah.
feel like I was getting looks when even with a mask on, like when I was near people, they're just like, whoa, guy, whoa, watch out with your air that you're breathing near me. So
Yeah,
which
I guess
it's weird how quickly that got like quiet, by the way, but there's a lot of other things I understand going on for sure, but it has been oddly quiet on that front. But anyways, yeah. This is the other thing. I'm not going to lie, man. It's hard not to spin down the road of conspiracy theory and like, even that term, like how do you discredit people that might have some truth in in the scenarios they're trying to project, right? You discredit it by calling it a conspiracy theory. And then it's like, oh, this person's just off their rocker. Look at the crazy person. But it's like, man, when your president's, invoking terms like God and righteousness to then also say stuff like, I'm going to have thousands and thousands upon heavily armed troops in the streets, it's kind of hard to not go down that road, man. It's hard. I mean, maybe it's just me. I don't know. I don't see anybody even watching the podcast today. The numbers aren't super high, and I don't care. Honestly, this is more. I'm not gonna lie, Seth. This is more for you and I. I need to just vent a little today.
Nope, that's fine.
Whatever. So yeah, man. Like it's like that's a hard road to not go down for me. Maybe not for everybody else, but for me right now, it's a little. I'm just like trying to see like things are getting weird, and I'm like, what's going on here? And I think it's a good thing. Like, to be clear, like things have not been right in a long time, right? Things have been pretty good, again, objectively, from when you compare it to 300 years ago. But things need to improve in a lot of different ways. And I think everybody's also like, whatever, we're just going to go down this road today. There is definitely some injustices that are being identified. But I think there's other things too that, like, for instance, part of like this whole thing is that the system's broken. But like, you don't hear a lot of people talking about prison reform, and prisons are horrible, man. They're like inhumane as hell. And that should be something I think addressed as well while we're at it, because it's not for reforming criminals, right? It's not for it's like inhumane punishment. And so that's another thing that I think hopefully maybe that gets addressed during this. I'm not sure, but anyways, again, I'll just all over the place, but like, yeah, it's just been a crazy time, man. And so I think some of my coworkers are like doing a pretty good job of, straddling that line between, hey, the world's on fire and like we have a job to do. Me, I'm doing my best. Is what I can say.
Yeah, and honestly, like my own coping mechanisms, right? Like being able to go out for a run or do something active and then like concentrate on work for a little bit has definitely helped. But I do have to turn off. I do have to turn off news. I do have to just step away and like close Twitter because I get distracted so easily, right? By, oh crap, what now, right? Like what next? I mean, I know everybody jokes about like 2020 being just this crazy shit show, but it definitely is, right? Like,
absolutely, it is.
It's just like it feels like it just keeps escalating, and there's something else that pops up there, and I don't know. The other thing that's been interesting to watch, though, like going back to, to the riots and the protests, I guess we should just call them, has been watching some of the protests and the solidarity from like Europe and other places, right? Because like it's always felt like this is a very kind of American, like U.S. problem that we have. The way that like, and I know that racism exists everywhere in the world. It's not just here, but like the history of slavery and everything else that goes into it here, there's definitely that black backlash, and things just haven't changed, right? The privilege that we have as white males is just, it is what it is, but it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed somehow. But it's going to take systemic changes, like you're saying, like prison reform, things as simple as, like the loan, like mortgage loans to people needs to be without like racial tendencies. All that needs to, it's the whole system that's caused these problems. And so it's been interesting to watch the protests that have occurred in the UK and Germany and other, Paris and other places that are basically like, holy crap, what's going on in the US, right? Like it's just.
Well, I mean, like that's the thing is we're not, so landmass and population, and then just diversity, and then also our borders being bordered by Canada and Mexico. I say all that because our composition is much different from like a lot of the countries, which are really the size of states over in Europe, right? Like let's be realistic, very different. But I do think that like what happens here in this like big kind of model of things that can happen, you see on much smaller scales everywhere, like you said. So what happens here is likely to happen somewhere else, just in a different way on a different scale. So we're a good thing for them to watch, because racism does exist. And interestingly enough, like it's not just like of color racism as well. I mean, there's like, again, going back to countries overseas, there's like, there's issues between neighboring countries. And so people that look similar are frowned upon just because of being from a different place. That is also racism. It's, but it's like I said, it's on a different scale. It's on a smaller scale. So yeah, like obviously everyone who's got a functioning normal brain can't tolerate it, hates it, but we unfortunately still have assholes out happens. There. Yeah, it still happens. And like the thing is too is with that officer, it's weird because it's like, all right, so I do jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying that like I've only been doing it for like over 2.5 years, somewhere between 2.5 3 years. And just from like a technical standpoint, what the fuck was he doing? Like, I mean, putting his knee on that guy's neck, it's like, what were you thinking? Like, what, man, like he wasn't thinking, he wasn't showing any kind of compassion. That's obvious. But really like it's like, it's either like this guy's super dumb and like, whoever trained him is just a total asshole. Or it's also, or it could also be all of that plus, just like malicious intent. But either way, just from like just analyzing it from a pure like technical standpoint, nobody puts a knee on a neck. Do you know what that like entails? Especially if your body's at a certain angle, it's just like, it becomes an issue where it's not just like you're not getting blood flow here or air here. It's like when your body is compressed and you can't, it causes asphyxiation. It causes a lot, your lungs can't compress. Yeah. So what he was doing, I have no idea. Like, I mean, obviously that's an understatement of the century, but yeah, it's just like, man, there's so many facets to all of this. And, but I do like to see that people, one of my favorite things about this whole thing though, I'll say silver lining, is that people are showing that, they're not just going to be complacent and sit back and just like seek convenience and comfort over like what's right. And I love that. That's the one thing I do love. I mean, I think out of all, I love that our country is saying, no, we're not going to tolerate this.
And that's where I don't necessarily want to call it, like I was going back to, I think it's not a riot. You know what I mean? Like most of what I've seen has been very peaceful protests, people saying like, this is not okay anymore. Right. And like, but then it all goes back to kind of this militarization of the police as well and how they respond to this. And so like we're escalating when there really needs to be no escalation. And
that's the crazy part is that's why I got freaked out watching him last night. So I'm like, man, like, there were a couple businesses that definitely got some damage, but nothing. We're talking just very minimal damage. But most of what I've seen locally, and there have been a lot of protests where I live, which, like that's, man, I'm proud of everybody. Awesome. Yeah. But it's been majority has been peaceful. So to hear him come out and be like, it felt like, you know what it felt like? It felt like a big damn baby being like, I didn't like y'all coming where I live to do this. And now there's going to be tons of troops. And, that's what it felt like. And it felt like an overreaction, like I think is what you're saying. Where it's so fucking ironic because it's like the thing that people are mad about, or a couple things. Obviously, we've talked about race, but the other one is like the big one, another big one. Both are equally scary. Is the militarization of police. I mean, I think Daniel Miessler said it well when he was like, you're dressing 20-something-year-olds in Navy SEAL attire. You're going to attract the wrong people. And I completely agree. Like, these aren't soldiers. These are law enforcement officials. But so anyways, again, another tangent. So yeah, you're right. To go off and say like, it's just ironic to be like, oh, because you're upset about militarization, I'm going to militarize heavily against you. That's what it felt like. Not for you, against you.
Against you. Yeah. And I don't know. So but then like, it also makes me like, the initial kind of like protests that came about, they were trying to do them peacefully. And I on both sides, like I always feel like there's kind of assholes that come out trying to take advantage of the situation. Right. So you'll see people jump in and do like, just rampant destruction just because they want to do like I don't know if it's just something about being at night in a large crowd. Hey, we're going to tip over a cop car. Like this will be fun. Right. Like, or something like that. Right. That's what happened in Salt Lake City. And as they're showing it, I'm like, man, the people that were there that were engaged in those activities weren't necessarily like, they were not the same people that were protesting peacefully. Right. It just seemed like they were taking advantage of that situation to go and, mess some shit up. Right. And that's the frustrating thing to watch because of course, like that's where you want the police to step in and be like, guys, right? Like, yeah, go hold your signs, protest, take your knee. That's great. But the second that you start to destroy property, the second that you start to, like you're escalating, the police should try to de-escalate that. They shouldn't try to like take that further to the next step. And most, to their credit, most police departments, that's the tact that they are taking, is they're just trying to maintain some semblance of order and peace and allow people to protest in an appropriate manner. So I don't know, maybe we're stepping in it by, bringing it up too much, but it's been
it's hard to avoid it, man. And like, yeah,
it is.
I want to get back to the days of talking about SSRF and talking about new cool web app request smuggling stuff. And like I want to talk about all that, but it's like, we're in a weird time. And I think it's not something I've seen it to this level before. And I don't mean just like the protests. I just mean like everything's sort of, it's like at a boiling point, I think, tension wise. I just feel tension everywhere I go amongst people, between people. And that's, it's pretty disheartening, but, I think the positives are, look, change is never easy. But obviously we need change. So, if it's going to be through, if it means some discomforts and some, territory you haven't been in yet, well, personally haven't been in it, not as like a society, just like personally.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to take. But yeah, I don't know where it's going to go, man. It's pretty weird. It's a pretty weird time.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Like yeah. I mean, and then on top of that, with all the coronavirus, like COVID stuff that's still going on, and you're watching case counts and they continue to go up, and people continue to die, right? It's almost like the protests, like can be an agent for that to spread even further, because the coronavirus doesn't give a shit, right? Like,
yeah, it doesn't care about politics.
It's like, oh, people are together. We're just gonna, spread that around, just like we did during the, everybody in Florida partying it up, right? That's the same sort of social
or in the
distancing
Ozarks
happening. Yeah, exactly. And so you fully expect case counts to go up there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like all of these different threads are leading somewhere, but where does that lead, right? To complete change, to
I think that's what everyone's wondering right now. So, I mean, it's from like a productivity standpoint. I will say I have done taken sort of what you're saying. Like during the day, I do try to pretty much focus not on news at all and just focus on what I've got to get done, which is, some days a decent amount. It keeps me pretty busy. And that's it's almost like a welcome distraction from some of the stuff. But then obviously it seeps in eventually. And so it's just been kind of it's just a weird command, because everybody's stuck at home. Everybody's like disconnected from each other socially. And then on top of that, you've got this stuff going on, and it can make you feel a little crazy. And anyways, that's kind of like why I want to just talk about it today, because I'm like, man, I can't put myself there to talk about technical stuff right now. It's just, I just can't do it. And if people don't like this episode, that's fine. I totally understand.
We'll get back to it. Maybe
we'll get back to it. Yeah, we'll get back to it. But I mean, I think it would be a little obtuse to just be like,
episode. Not recognize it. Yeah, it's just leading up to our 100th episode. Ken's going to declare his candidacy, right? Like,
I don't have any answers, man. Could you imagine the next person who's like looking at becoming president and just being like, not worth it? Oh, I don't want to inherit this shit show.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, man. I just, I do feel like, I do feel insulated from a lot of it, right? Like, we are in the tech industry, and I am as busy as I've ever been from a strict contract perspective and business perspective, and clients and everyone that's coming to me coming to to Redpoint for
assessments, thread modeling, whatever,
all that kind of stuff.
All that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm trying to balance that at the same time, but it's like, I do feel, blessed or fortunate to still have something to do, right? Like, it would be extremely difficult, to not have any work, and then this kind of shit's going on, right? What do you do? Outside of sit there and watch the news, your propaganda of choice, and get angry at the other side, because that seems to be what happens, right? You look at Facebook, you look at Twitter, like any of the social media, there's no discourse there, right?
No, yeah.
It's just like a whole bunch of name calling on either side, and no one's willing to listen to anyone else's viewpoint. Yeah.
Well, and one thing the one thing I think we can do, and we should, if for anybody who actually has watched this episode and follows along, if you have some good donation links, send it our way. We'll vet them, and we can post them from our Twitter account or something like that. Because I know there's some donations going around, but I want to make sure if we're promoting a donation link, that it's it's legit. It's not, that it's okay. That it's not going to be some sort of money
scam
going
or
to a
whatever.
bad cause. Scam or something like that. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much what we can do. Yeah, I mean, there's that we've talked a lot about like the negative aspects, but I am very happy that like well, this is the other thing too, is I saw for amongst the protesters, there were a lot of young um there were a lot of young people, all different races, but age-wise, there were a lot of younger people. That made me feel really good, though, or it made me really feel great about and optimistic about our future. It's clear that the next generations are sick of the same old stuff and want things to change. And I think it's like that's really promising. You're seeing young people with more empathy, with more compassion, with more awareness, with less less focus on money and things, and more focus on social issues, and just sort of like wanting to change things, wanting to improve things. Lots of big topics, such as like anywhere from this to like the environment to our food supply chain. I've seen all kinds of things that people are paying attention to now, especially young people, that I feel like are going to bring a lot of awareness and change things positively. So there is a silver lining, I feel like, to all of this. But yeah, it's stressful right now when you've got to have a job, that you got to do things, and you have to, like, you've got kids that you have to like now homeschool because the schools are closed, and then also explain to them what's going on and why they can't see their friends, and why like we can't go just get dinner and I got to drive a couple towns away to go get like a meal for the night and take back roads to get home. And it's just like, yes, all this stuff sucks and it's stressful, but I think that the long term of it is improvements in our society. And I think that the people driving that are the next generations. And it's very nice to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. Right. And, I mean, on the podcast, like we talk about the kids, right? And I do have, like, my daughter is 17 now, right? She'll be a senior this next year, going to college in a couple of years. But
man, how time flies!
I know. And then, but
like this big a second ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just wait. It happens really fast.
Yeah.
But her like level of understanding, and then like also her compassion for people like in disadvantaged situations, right? Like I know at that age I just had no clue, right? And she's definitely, and her peer group is definitely more attuned to injustice, and I think that's a direct result of these sorts of protests, of the discussions that are going on, of Black Lives Matter, of climate change, science that's coming out, of actually just like engaging with the world rather than being so focused on themselves. And so like there is promise there, like you're saying. Like I think there is hope to it, that things will continue to get better, and that's all we can really go for, right? It's like, yeah, the past sucks, right? It does, but we know better now, so we do better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of hope there. And it's kind of funny because you had mentioned it earlier, but and obviously not everybody can do this, but because you and I train people internationally, we tend to bring our kids along, and that's on purpose. That's to like give the concept of being a global citizen is an important one to me, I think, and to you as well, which is to understand that the world's pretty big. And, just because you live in one country doesn't mean that, you shouldn't be knowledgeable and involved globally in all of the things that go on, in the sense of just being aware and like understanding, hey, we do things here in this way, but it's okay to do it a different way in a different place. And just those sort of like understanding differences and giving that perspective of like, oh, so these people believe in this religion and they have these customs and these traditions, and that's cool. That's really awesome. We should embrace that. And these people do it differently over here, and that's fine too. Like, I think there's a lot of value in that. And I mean, you and I bringing the kids along on these trips, I've definitely seen like Max's maturity level has, every time we go on one of those trips, increases quite a bit just from, I don't know. There's something to it, man.
Seeing something else. Yeah. Seeing something else and actually like realizing that, the little bubble, like it's really easy to live in your little bubble, right?
Right.
In general, you go to school, you see the same people that you see, you like go to the grocery store, you go to the gym, and then you go back home and sleep, and you do it all over again. And I mean, that's one of the things that's been hard from like the whole social distancing, quarantining things, is the travel aspect, because you get addicted to it, right? Like it's
right.
Hey, I'm always looking forward to, hey, what's the next trip? Where is it that I'm going to go experience something else that's new and that I haven't seen before, right? But exposing kids or anyone to that actually helps with an empathy, from an empathetic perspective or an empathy perspective, right? Like being able to understand that my viewpoint and the people that I live with, just because we do it one way doesn't mean that someone else doing it another way is wrong.
Right.
There's a myriad of aspects to your life and to your situation. And if you were raised in that situation, you'd probably do it, you'd probably treat it the same way that they do. And realizing that you're not necessarily special is a good thing. Right.
Yeah.
I think there's entirely too much of that we all think that we're special, and I don't know, like everyone deserves a trophy, right? That whole aspect of, guess what? I know that I suck at a whole bunch of stuff, but I'll still do my best if you ask me to do it, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's so
we're all over the place today, right? Yeah.
No, yeah, it's definitely an aspect of like there's billions of people on Earth, and I tell Max all the time, I'm like, hey man, you're special to me. And that's where I leave it, because I'm like, yeah, you're special to me. Yep. But there are billions of us, and one person isn't more important than another, and that's like, hard to it's hard. It's just this, so many nuances to this entire discussion, by the way. And I mean, we'll get back on track next week, but if anyone, like I said, if anyone didn't like this episode, I understand, but it's really not for them. Yeah, I understand, but it doesn't like make me feel any other way than, hey, this podcast was always supposed to be just us kind of talking about what we want to talk about. So it is what it is, and right now I don't really feel like talking about tech. I think there's too many issues going on and too many things that are, I was hoping that we would get some feedback from viewers on, like, granted, we didn't publicize this episode at all. We just kind of went live. I was hoping, and maybe people will tweet or go into the Slack channel and leave, or on YouTube, leave comments. I mean, one way or the other. I'm always up for civil discourse. But like maybe people will let us know how they've been coping with current events, and still getting their job done, and still living their life, and maybe that helps somebody else who happens to scroll by those comments and takes a look and says, you know what, maybe they learned something from your approach. So if you are listening, feel free to post some comments about it in Slack, on YouTube, wherever you want to post about it.
Yeah, please do. Right, I think it's all useful. And I still think, stuff like the virtual happy hours that are going on, or the virtual discussions that we have with people that we would normally see face to face, but we're not right now. I think that all helps. But that this is the main topic that's running right now. Because society's a little unbalanced at the moment.
Yeah, it's a little
to
weird,
say the least, right?
Yeah.
But
I have hope, but it is a big one right now. So so getting back to some thoughts on like other stuff. You mentioned Midsummer's Night. That's June 24th. That's going to be those are handcrafted, like hand-picked talks for that. So we've got some really cool speakers. I don't want to like drop their names yet.
Yeah.
We both, you and I and Stefan Edwards, and InfoSec Cannon, Heather, we want to sort of, wait, is it? No, it's InfoSec Anon. I'm an idiot. Heather Lawrence. Anyways, so the four of us are working to get a code of conduct together, put a page up describing the talks. We've already personally reached out to the speakers to get confirmation. So all that stuff's coming up soon, like you said, Seth, in the next week. And it's going to be like very, like one of the talks is very much focused on building a good CSP, for instance. And like, these are meant to be really practical, helpful talks. So I feel like it's going to be really cool. For a virtual happy hour, if we end up doing one of those this week, Seth, just if we want to do one this week or next week, let's just start promoting it soon.
Yeah.
Dude, like just even this hour of us talking, let alone a virtual happy hour, those things are really helpful when you're stuck at home and dealing with
society at large.
Society maybe collapsing. No biggie. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll do one this week. I think there is a gin and juice one that's running tomorrow night, if you haven't heard of that. But maybe next week we'll put one together. We've got 3 weeks until Midsummer Night's Con, and it'll be good. I mean, at the very least, you know that Stefan will talk, right? He's doing one of the keynotes, and you and I will talk about apparently something for half an hour, right? Like secure code review, right?
Man, that's There's
you and I need to talk about what we're going to talk about for half an hour.
Yeah, no, I have some thoughts. Like,
okay,
well, I've got some opinions. Yeah. But
other than that, right? Like, find us on Twitter. We'll start posting out some of the links for the different charities that you can donate to for Black Lives Matter and some of the protests that have gone on. And then we'll also start tweeting out, what people are doing to stay sane and actually to focus. Because I think that's a good discussion to have. I remember running, there was a Twitter thread, a year ago or so that I ran on, actually just maintaining sanity in general. Like, what is it that people do to break away from tech for a little bit? And this is almost like the flip side of that is, hey, when life gets you down, what do you do, right? How do you maintain your sanity? And a lot of those answers could be the same, right? Like, I know that I've picked up like running regularly again because I have to, right? I've got to do something. So,
yeah, exercise has been a big one for me. Reading has been a big one. Right now I'm reading, man, I hope I don't butcher this. Homo Deus, I think.
Okay.
It's by the same author who wrote Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind.
Oh, cool.
So it's really interesting because the first book was about sort of how we came up with money and how we came up with religion and how we even had civilizations that were no longer hunter-gatherers, and like how harvesting grain changed everything, and just all this interesting, fascinating stuff that I didn't really know about, as well as genetic information about how, because I always thought we're just like Neanderthals who evolved, and that's not necessarily the truth. We're like an entirely different species, a mixture. We killed off the Neanderthals. So that book was super fascinating and interesting. And then Homo Deus is his follow-up, that's where we've been. This is where we're going to go next. So he talks about, it's actually funny. He opens the first chapter with, "We've beat war, famine, and plague." In the midst of, and I read this in the midst of a plague.
So, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's anyways, he talks about where we're going next and some trippy stuff. It's super fun. So anyways, reading and exercising have been my outlet.
Yeah. Yep. Sweet. Well, I mean, we've been talking for an hour, so maybe we'll cut it for today, and then we'll get back to tech stuff at some point, right? When it makes sense. At the very least, Midsummer Night's Con, but that's 3 weeks away, so it's all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, find us online. and join the Absolute AppSec Twitter or Slack channel. I would love to have you. If you've got other things that you want to talk about, let us know, and we'll do it next week.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to
Thank you. Okay.
later.